We are doing a series on Genesis, if you're new to the church. So today's talk is entitled, Jesus, He Knows Me. And two Genesis fans down the front. And then Jeff's going to lead us in a rousing rendition of I Can't Dance to finish the morning. Not true. We are actually working through the book of Genesis, which is far more exciting. John Hopkins is going like that, which means that was a bad joke. Andy Shev loved it in the week. Oh, it was good. Okay, excellent. Josie liked it. Brilliant. Wonderful. Two Genesis fans. Excellent. Let's forget that. We are looking at the book of Genesis, which is far more interesting than anything Phil Collins has ever done. Peter Gabriel. So Genesis, the book, we're up to chapter 5, which is a difficult chapter. At the beginning of the series, Tom told us that there are three major acts that happen within the book of Genesis and the whole Bible as a whole. They are generation, the creation of everything, degeneration, the ruin, the downfall of everything, and then regeneration, the restoration, the making good, the making perfect, the renewal of everything. He also told us there are three major themes. These are life, love, and land. And what we're going to see today is the degeneration of life, the ruin of life. I'm going to give you a quick recap of where we come from. I spilled that everywhere. In week 1, we saw that God created man, generation. He gave man life. He breathed into man and gave him life. Life was perfect. God's the daddy, as Andy taught us. We had a perfect life in relationship with God. We were enjoying that in the Garden of Eden. And then Adam, he messed up. He sinned. That means he went against God's plan. He went his own way. And God said, okay, I'm going to judge you. He'd given this threat, if you eat from the tree of life, you will surely die. In Genesis 3, as Jeff told us, God's cast this judgment upon man. Actually, now you're going to have to work the ground. It will be painful. Women will have the pain of childbirth, and eventually everyone will die. It's not very cheerful. But that is the degeneration of life. The perfect life that God gave us is ruined because of sin. Sin leads to death. Death is the punishment for sin. Quite heavy already. So this is where we have come to, and now we have got to chapter 5. And I was thinking during the week about I love London. No, actually, I don't. When I was a kid, I used to love going to London. Not really because of any of the sights or anything, but because of Hamleys. Have you ever been to Hamleys? The greatest toy shop on earth. I loved it. When I was about 7, it was my aim in life to work in Hamleys, okay? To be a shop worker. Not on the cash desk. I wanted to be one of the people that would demonstrate the toys. I mean, that was the ultimate, it still is in many ways, the ultimate job for me. And I used to love it going there, especially the people with the aeroplanes. You know, they had these little polystyrene aeroplanes, and they chuck them and they go like in a loop, and they catch them and they have 2 going at once, and you'd be a little kid standing there and these planes just whizzing around your head, and you just think, I want to do that with my life. I want to throw polystyrene around at kids and miss them because it would circle around and stuff like that. So I went and I bought one of these planes and I took it home. I was about 7. I thought I'm going to learn, so I got out the instructions, which is rare for me. I usually throw them away and then can't do it. But I had the instructions. I looked, I thought, first thing I'm going to learn how to do a loop-the-loop. So I read the instructions. I threw the plane straight up, right at the perfect peak. Smash. Glass cascaded down upon my 7-year-old head, and I had completely broken our lampshade. The first thing that went through... my dad still hasn't forgiven me. The first thing that went through my head was not the glass. It was, how can I make my brother take the blame for this? So, I gathered up the bits of glass, I took the aeroplane, I ran upstairs to my gullible little 5-year-old brother, and I said to him, look at these, they're beautiful. And Shane was like, wow, they are. You know, these little bits of glass. I said, and you can take the credit for them. And he went, yes, fantastic, what do I do? So I got him to hold out his hands, I put the glass in one hand, the plane in the other. I said, run down to Mum and say, look what I did. So Shane, little fool, ran down the stairs, ran out to Mum, Mum, look what I did. Glass and a plane. I was at the top of the banisters, like peering through, going, I'm so great, I am fantastic, I'm incredible, I'm a genius. My mum looked at my brother and went, can I have a word, Liam? She had heard every single word I said. I thought I was a complete little genius. No, my mum knew exactly what was going on. I could not escape the punishment. And I learned that, well, I didn't really learn, I still carried on doing it the rest of my sort of child life, but I kind of learned, you can't escape punishment for what you've done. I have a tendency to want other people to take the punishment for what I've done, but it doesn't work like that. You can't escape punishment. And what we're going to see in Genesis 5 is a difficult theme, but we cannot escape the judgment of God. That's what we're going to see as we read this chapter. I remember distinctly the exact moment Tom Shaw asked me to preach on this chapter. He was in fits of laughter, absolute hysterics. He just couldn't stop laughing. Eventually he got his breath back and he went, "It's basically just a list of names." It is just a list of names, basically. And I'm happy to preach on this chapter, but I'm not going to be the one to read it out. So would you give a big round of applause to Tom Shaw? The whole thing, please, Tom.
No problem. I have actually got some new glasses, which I need. Now I've hit 30.
It'll come up on the screen if it's easy.
Come up on the screen. Don't laugh. Feeling a bit vulnerable. Okay, thank you. Josie likes them.
He always
All
has
that
to
matters.
upstage me.
Okay, are we ready?
Just get on with it.
This is the book of the generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female, he created them, and he blessed them, and he named them man when they were created. When Adam had lived 130 years, he fathered a son in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth. And the days of Adam after he fathered Seth were 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. When Seth had lived 105 years, he fathered Enosh. Seth lived after he fathered Enosh 807 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he fathered Kenan. Enosh lived after he fathered Kenan 815 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. When Kenan had lived 70 years, he fathered Mahalalel. Kenan lived after he fathered Mahalalel 840 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Kenan were 910 years, and he died. When Mahalalel had lived 65 years, he fathered Jared. Mahalalel lived after he fathered Jared 830 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. When Jared had lived 162 years, he fathered Enoch. Jared lived after he fathered Enoch 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. And thus, all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after he fathered Methuselah 300 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he fathered Lamech. And Methuselah lived after he fathered Lamech 782 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered a son, and called his name Noah, saying, out of the ground, that the Lord has cursed this one, shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. Lamech lived after he fathered Noah 595 years. He had other sons and daughters, and thus all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. And Noah was 500 years old. Noah fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Let's give him a round. There's going to be a quiz on that. There really isn't. Gosh. So what we get in Genesis 5 is basically a list of names. And there are 4 characteristics for each name that is repeated. We are told their name. We are told the age they were when they fathered a particular child. We're told how many years they lived from that point onwards, and then the age they were when they died. And we're told that again, and again, and again, and again. And the temptation when we get to a passage like this, honestly, is just to skip it. It really is. And I imagine if you were reading this in your sort of just reading of Genesis, you'd probably go, oh, that's interesting, but there's a flood at the next chapter, animals, that's far more exciting. Skip on. I know that would be my temptation, to be honest. If I were reading through Genesis, I probably would just skim read this chapter and not really think about it. And seriously, all joking aside, when I was preparing for this, I got loads of commentaries, I got preaching series by some of my favourite authors and preachers, and literally the majority of them went chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. They entirely skipped this chapter. And I was getting angry with these people, thinking, come on, surely you've got to have something to say. But God convicted me about the fact that I would just easily skip this chapter if I were reading it myself. And I just felt like at the beginning, I'm just going to pray. But as a Bible-believing church, we have to believe that this chapter has something to say for us today. As difficult as that may seem, this chapter has something to say to each one of us. So I'm just going to pray, and then we'll try and make something of it. Lord God, your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. I believe that, Lord. I believe that for Genesis 5 as much as I do for any other part of the Bible. Lord, your word is God-breathed, every bit of it. I believe that as much for 2 Timothy as I do Genesis 5. Lord, your word is living and active. It's a double-edged sword. I believe that as much for Hebrews as I do for this, Lord. And Father, I just pray that you would come. Holy Spirit, help us. Help me. Help every one of us to listen and just really open your scripture to us. Give us a renewed confidence in it. Send your Holy Spirit to touch our hearts. Father, would you come and help us? In your holy name, amen. Amen. So we're going to look at this in 3 sections. We're going to look at it under 3 titles: the discovery of death, the dodging of death, and the defeat of death. In a Tom Shaw-esque style, all beginning with the same letter. How clever. And I need 4 people out the front, so let's see. Can I have Hugh? I know he's in the middle of a sentence, but could I have Hugh down here? Could I have Davith? Would you come and stand here? And Dodge, why not Dodge? And Greg as well. Would you come and stand in a line right across the front? Brilliant. Space out a little bit, come on. There we go, brilliant. Now, I used to work in a register office. It was mind-numbingly boring. I had this job during the summer just to kind of make a bit of money. My job was to get all the old registers of people who had died and type them up onto the computer. It was horrible. They were kind of illegible calligraphy. You couldn't read it at all, and I just had to go through and type the name of the person, the date of the birth, and the date of the death, save. The name of the person, date of the death. It was awful. I felt like I was writing Genesis 5 for the entire Kent region. It was not fun in the slightest. But you can look at a book like that and think, okay, everyone dies. You know, we know. We know. We live with death on a daily basis. We see it on TV, we read it in the paper. I'd imagine the majority have lost a relative. We know, we've heard already, we've lost someone from our church. We are familiar with the fact that everybody dies. But imagine you are one of these people. Let me introduce you. We have Adam over here. Actually, I've got a costume for you, Adam. If you could just... That's a joke! Whew, gosh. We have Adam here. We have Seth over here. Hi, Seth. We have Enosh here and Keenan at the end. These are Adam's family tree. A little bit of it anyway. And basically, I want you to imagine you are one of these guys. Put yourself in the shoes of Adam, or the fig leaf of Adam, or whatever. Put yourself in the fig leaf of Adam and imagine things from his perspective. We're used to the fact that everybody dies. But Adam gets told by God, right, you've sinned, now you're going to die. And then for 800 years, he doesn't. Isn't that a bit weird? For 800 years, Adam must have been thinking, how does this death thing work? You know, do I get a warning? Do I have to make an appointment? You know, how does it work? When am I going to die? Am I actually going to die with God, right? For 800 years, he wonders. Then age 930, die. Keel over, that's it. Hey, excellent. He dies in a very graceful position and quite relaxed as well. That's rubbish. So imagine now you are Seth, okay? Seth has seen his dad die, maybe his mum as well, and he probably is thinking, okay, so how does this work? How does this work? Okay, I know they ate from the tree, so they deserve to die, but what's going to happen to me? Am I just going to live forever? How's this going to happen? But sure enough, age 900 and something, Seth drops down dead as well. That was far better. Okay, I think you've got to kind of keep making them more elaborate, the deaths, as you go along. So now here we have Enosh. Okay, Enosh has looked back across his family. He's seen his parents die. He's seen his grandparents die, maybe a couple of uncles and aunts here and there. And he's a bit of a statistician and thinking, I guess the odds aren't really in my favour. I still don't really know how it works, but I guess I'm going to die as well. And sure enough, Enosh drops down dead. Oh, and he nearly pulled me with him. Excellent, finally we get to Keenan down here, and Keenan looks back across this dead... I mean, they wouldn't have just been lying there. He would just like, hang on, they probably would have been buried. But he looks across them all, and he sees his parents have died, his grandparents have died, his great-grandparents have died, all the uncles and aunts and the odd cousins who you never really liked anyway, and they're all dead, and he looks back at them, and by now, he's finally got the point, all right, I get it, everyone dies. Okay, by the time you get to someone like Keenan, it's become an established fact that everyone dies. But what we've seen here is a discovery of death. They kind of get, you've got to die as well. Yeah, now, that's it. Oh, that must have hurt. So we see this discovery of death. As man starts to spread throughout the earth, so death spreads as well. And what started for Adam as a kind of, I don't know how this works. By the time you get to Canaan, it's an established fact. Like we know today, everyone dies. Are you with me? That makes sense? Okay. Adam and Seth, please come up here on the stage, and the rest of you can go back to your seats. Brilliant. I need one more person as well. Let's have Joey. Why not? Come on, Joey. Could you stand about here? Yep, wonderful. Seth in the middle. Up here, please. Come on, Joey. It's the stage. You love being on these things. There we go. Focus the limelight on Joey. This is Joey is going to play God, only temporarily. This is Adam. Sweet, says Joey. I get to be God. This is Adam. Oh no, you're Adam. Swap. Ooh, can't have that. Seth. You are here, Seth, you're Adam, you're God. Wonderful. Now, I think what the author of Genesis 5 is doing is this. He's saying, remember in chapter 2, when God said, when you eat from that tree, you'll surely die. Remember in chapter 3, where he said, right, now you've sinned, you'll surely die. I think what the author is doing is saying, God was right. And here is a long list of people that prove that point. Death has now spread to the world. And you can understand Adam and Eve dying, but the question that people often raise is, how come Seth died? Or Enosh? Or all the other guys whose names I can't pronounce? And how come I died? Because I didn't eat from that tree. How come it's not just Adam and Eve that have that punishment of death? And the answer can be found in this passage. We're always tempted to skip forward to Romans or something like that, but the answer is here in this passage. Can I have the next slide, please? And verse 1. There we go. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Don't really look that similar, but there you go. Joey's slightly more muscular, although it's a close call. When you father someone, you pass on some of your attributes, your characteristics, maybe even some of your looks, some of your nature to the person that you father. So it says here in verse 1 that God created man and he made him in the likeness of God. So something like that. So God passed on some of his attributes and characteristics to Adam, who he fathered. Now verse 3 says this. When Adam had lived 130 years, he fathered a son in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth. In the same sort of way that God fathered Adam and passed on some of his characteristics to Adam, Adam also then passed on some of his characteristics to Seth, namely his sinfulness. Seth is now in the image of Adam. That's not to say Seth isn't in the image of God as well. We all are. But it's that theme of degeneration again. The image of God has started to get marred and changed and corrupted as sin has entered the world. God passed on to Adam his own sinlessness. Adam messed up and passed on to Seth and to me and to everyone in this church his own sinfulness. Does that make sense? That's why Paul can say in Romans 5 that sin came through one man, Adam, and through sin came death, and death spread to all mankind because all have sinned. So, are you depressed yet? That's quite a dark point. Let's go back to our seats. And if you feel like this is a bit downbeat, the fact that everyone dies, it is. It is a bit dark, and it is a bit sort of upsetting and a little bit miserable, but it's just what Genesis 5 tells us. And there's no way of preaching on Genesis 5 and it not be a little bit harrowing, a little bit difficult, because I think the point of Genesis 5 is to say everyone dies because of sin. You cannot escape the judgment of God. God's judgment catches up with everyone, irrespective of whether you think you're clever like me and you can palm it off on someone else. God's judgment always catches up with everyone. At the end of their lives, everyone dies, and then they will face the judgment of God. And that is a sober point, but I think that's what the author intends us to feel. And from this low point where we're feeling a bit like, this is so futile. This is so futile. Everyone just lives and then they die. They have kids and then they die. That's so futile. It's so frustrating. We're meant to feel that. We're meant to feel angry at this list of people who die and just think, is there no good news? I think every single person in this chapter must have been thinking, is there no good news? Is there no answer to this? Is there no way out? And then we find two verses that give us slight glimmers of hope. And those are the verses we're going to look at now. Verse 24, the dodging of death. When we come to verse 24, it's quite bizarre. It says this, Enoch walked with God and he was not, for God took him. That's a bit odd. That's not normal. Everyone else lives and dies. Enoch doesn't. God takes him. And over the many centuries since this was written, people have tried to come up with many different ways of explaining what happened to Enoch. Some Jewish heretics decided that actually what happened was he went to heaven and he became an angel called Metatron. Not Megatron, Metatron. It does sound like something out of the Transformers, but no, it's there in the book of Enoch. And he was basically kind of akin to God, and so they called him the Lesser Yahweh. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. That's not in our Bibles, but it just goes to show that people were struggling to get their heads around what had happened to Enoch. It was different. It was a bit weird. What happened to him? Don't believe that, by the way. That was nonsense. Just underline that. More recently, people have said, well, actually, being taken by God is like a euphemism. It's like shorthand for he died young. And I can see the logic of that. You look at the chapter, everyone else lives to 700, 800, 900, something like that. Enoch lives to 365, and he was taken by God. And it's just a polite way of saying, yeah, he died young. Put a nice edge on it. But I don't think that's true. I can kind of see the logic of it, but it's not true. If you read Hebrews 11, it says this, by faith Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death. Not that he was taken up young. He did not see death. Something happened to Enoch whereby God came and he took him. And he didn't die. And that is weird. And I don't know how God took him, and I don't know why God took him, but I have to believe the plain reading of Genesis 5 is that God just took Enoch and he didn't die. That is strange. Imagine you are one of these other guys in the list, Methuselah or Lamech, looking on thinking, hang on a second, everyone's died but not Enoch. There'd be this faint glimmer of hope. You'd suddenly think, I wonder if that means that no one else is going to die now. I wonder if there is a way out, a kind of loophole in the curse of Genesis 3. Maybe we're not going to die anymore. But sure enough, Methuselah dies, Lamech dies, everyone else dies, right down to my relatives, and eventually I'll die as well. We can't escape death. Even this strange little glimmer of hope in Enoch. People must have been thinking, where's the good news? And they see Enoch and they think, there's the good news. Fantastic. Death is defeated. But no, it isn't. Enoch dodged death. I don't know why. I don't know how. But everyone else still died after him. He dodged death, but he could not defeat death. And that's important to bear in mind when we think about Enoch. Whatever he teaches us about faith, about intimacy with God, about walking with God, all these things, it's great to learn from him. But he did not defeat death. He merely dodged death. And not by his own goodness or own will either. God took him. He didn't catch God out. God wasn't wandering around one day and suddenly think, how on earth did you get here? And he was like, I found a little back passage. I sort of sneaked in through the secret door and here I am in heaven. No, God took him. Should we expect God to do the same to us? No, I don't think so. There's this wonderful quote by Tom Wright that says this, Enoch and Elijah, he was the only other person said to be taken by God. They were not held up as a model for what a pious or devout Israelite might expect to happen again. Nobody suggested that if someone lived an exceptionally holy life or accomplished some great deed, they might be similarly treated. No explanation is given. They remain the unexplained exceptions to the otherwise universal rule. I think he's right. Imagine you are one of the people in Genesis 5, or one of the original readers. You read, this person dies, then their son dies, and their son dies, and their son dies, and you get fed up with this repetition. You just think this is so depressing. It's so disheartening. Everyone dies. Is there no good news? Is there no way out? You see Enoch, you think maybe this, and then everyone else dies as well, and you just think this is pathetic. There's no way out. You just resign yourself to the fact that everyone's going to die, and it's depressing. And it's right to feel like that. It's right to feel like death is kind of wrong. It's right to get annoyed with death. Death is hard. And I don't want you to think that just because I'm saying the word a lot today, I'm treating it lightly or in a glib kind of fashion. Death is hard. And it's not nice. Helen and I were at a funeral this week, and for all the rejoicing for the person's life, which was wonderful, it's still hard. Part of you still feels like this is wrong. It shouldn't be happening. There's got to be some good news. You still feel like death doesn't belong in this world. And that's right, it doesn't. It is the result of sin. We've lost someone in our church this week, and that's hard. And we're right to feel like this is a bit miserable, a bit depressing. But from the low that this takes us to, it only goes to accentuate the glorious truth that we learn later on. And imagine yourself as one of the readers of Genesis 5, thinking, Enoch, I got my hopes up, I've had them dashed. And then you come to verse 29, and you find this second sort of glimmer of hope. Verse 28 and 29 says this: When Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered a son, and he called his name Noah, saying, Out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. This is the only other time in Genesis 5 where the pattern of name, age when they had this child, number of years they lived, death, was broken. This and Enoch, the only times when those patterns are broken. Noah is the only person who has something said over his life, some kind of hope for the future. Maybe something is going to be different about Noah. And look specifically at what Lamech says. He says, Out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. What he is saying is that curse of Genesis 3, as the result of sin, maybe Noah is going to be the one to defeat that. Maybe Noah is going to be the one to undo that curse of Genesis 3. In essence, there is a hope over Noah that maybe he is going to defeat everything that Adam got wrong. And that means death as well. There's this hope that maybe Noah is going to be the one. If I were there, I would be excited, thinking, where's the good news? Where's the good news? I hear this said about Noah. I think, there's the good news. He is going to defeat death. I get excited about it. But then you get on to chapter 9, and you read those familiar words. Noah lived however many years, and he died. Even Noah. He did incredible things in his life. Really incredible. We're going to hear about those in the next few weeks. But even he could not escape or defeat death. Is that a bit depressing? It's meant to be. I think it is. I think we're meant to feel the futility. We're meant to hate the idea of death. We're meant to think, oh, I wish it was just some good news. I wish there was a way out. Not palming it off on someone else. I wish there was a way out. I wish someone could defeat death. But we can't. And from the low point of Genesis 5, it just drags us down until we feel rubbish. And we just think, oh, everyone dies. Is there not more to life than just preparing for death? That's what I feel when I read Genesis 5. But from this low point of Genesis 5, we are meant to look up to the glorious truth that we learn thousands of years later, that there is someone who can defeat death. There is more to life than just preparing for death. There is someone who can right the wrong of Adam. There is Jesus. There's Jesus. All these people in Genesis 5 just feeling like, oh, there's no way out. Where's the good news? Where's the good? There's the good news. Jesus. From the low of Genesis 5, we're meant to look up to the glorious truth of Romans 5, that sin came through one man, Adam, and through sin came death. But through Jesus and his one act of righteousness came life. That is incredible. We're meant to feel the low of Genesis 5. We're meant to feel the frustration, the futility of Genesis 5. And then we're meant to look up and see, but there is Jesus. Adam sinned, and he died as a punishment for his sin. Jesus had no sin. He died and he took the punishment for our sin. Both Jesus and Adam were made as perfect, sinless human beings. Everything that Adam got utterly wrong, Jesus got perfectly right. That is incredible. Every choice that Adam made to disobey God, Jesus always obeyed God. Adam died as a result of sin. Jesus died and defeated sin. That is wonderful. That is glorious. There's the good news. All these people looking at this list thinking, where's the good news? Where's the good news? Maybe you thought that when Tom was reading it. Where's the good news? All these people died. Where's the good news? There's the good news. Jesus. Not Noah, not Enoch. Enoch dodged death. He couldn't defeat death. Noah, they thought he might defeat death. He didn't even do that. Jesus defeated death. He didn't merely dodge death. He went through death and out the other side and crushed it underneath his feet. And yes, every one of us is still going to die. But we have a hope that when we stand before the judgment seat of God, he's going to give us eternal life. What does that mean for us? If you are a Christian here today, it means so many things. We still all have to die, and it's still going to be hard, and we're still going to lose people from our church, and we're going to lose people from our families, and one day all of us are going to die. But it means you can be excited about the fact that Jesus has done for you what Enoch couldn't do, what Noah couldn't do, what my parents couldn't do, what I cannot do, what my children will never be able to do, and that is defeat death. Jesus has done that for us. Jesus has reversed the curse of Genesis 3 and said, Adam brought you death, I bring you life. That is remarkable. And one day, God is going to regenerate everything. And this sin-sick, death-ridden world will be restored to be a wonderful new earth where we will spend eternity with God. And that is amazing. And so when I read Genesis 5 and I feel down, I think I'm meant to feel that. But don't stay there. Lift your heads and look at the glorious truth of Jesus. He has turned everything around. And if you're not a Christian here today, I beg you to become a Christian. I do. I plead with you. Give your life to Jesus. You have an opportunity to come into a relationship with the God who made everything. The only one who could turn around this sin-filled, death-filled world. You can have a relationship with him. Every one of us will die, irrespective of whether we are Christian or non-Christian. But when you get to the judgment seat of God, he will say, are you in Adam or are you in Jesus? He will look at you and say, are you going to receive all the punishment that was due to Adam or all the life that was won by Jesus? That's the choice you have in front of you today, if you're not a Christian. And this maybe has felt dark and heavy, but it could just be the most important thing you'll ever hear. You have a choice. And we don't have to wait until we die to meet this living God. You can know him now. And I want to encourage you, I want to beg you and plead with you to get to know this Jesus.